Hello. Just setting up, making sure everything's online and working before I jump into it. Welcome, welcome. Alrighty. There's just one person in the stream, so I probably don't need to do a full-on intro. But this week I'm working on a new project, taking a break from what we've been working on the past couple weeks. You Are Not Alice, which is a social engineering slash hacking sandbox game. This week we learned a lot in the last couple of weeks, so we're trying to put a lot of those learnings into play into a new project, keeping code clean. There's some uh, cool tips Jason threw out in the last project, but I was a little too far into it to incorporate a lot of them. So just thought I'd start something new, make a little demo. We got a cool hand painted tile asset that's really, really pretty. So been just itching to make some sort of strategy game with that. And that's what we're gonna do. You'll have to excuse my cat in front of my screen. But as of right now, all we've got is just a hex grid and tiles that we've set up. So we've got some um, just basic models set up, scriptable objects for both tiles. So we can say like a desert tile can have a few variants. We can adjust the color and add some stuff to it later. Our game manager has a library of what tiles we can put in during the initial world generation, but we're going to define some transitions from tile to tile later. Um, the gist of the game is you'll get a random world. You will pick a race. So, like elves like forests, mermaids like water, dwarves like mountains, and so on. Um, and your goal will be to convert all of the tiles in the world into your preferred tile. So elves will want to convert everything to forests, mermaids want to convert everything to water, and so on. You do that by, well, we're still figuring that out, but what I'm thinking right now is we will have some sort of real-time strategy component where, for example, you load into this game, you get a random world. Let's double check that the world randomly generates each time. And you'll be able to say like, hey, this looks like a good world for like maybe dwarves because all these mountains are really close. So you get kind of that like start of the game component in like Settlers of Catan where you get that random world and then choose your strategy. So rather than picking a race kind of like StarCraft where you queue in as Terran or whatever, you'll get this world, and then you'll be able to say like, hey, I think I want to try like maybe these deserts in the corner are cool for like I can probably convert these really well, really easily, and then have like a small corner that I can expand out from. I don't know. But basically, you will pick a race, and each of your like home tiles will be um, the home bases for your race. So if you were to pick mermaids, you'd have a base here, base here, base here, base here, base here, and you would be able to interact with this world in two ways. One of them is you can harvest resources from a tile, and this kind of gets into our mapping of states of how the tiles transition between them. But if you were to harvest water from a water tile, for example, you're going to get a desert tile. If you harvest wood from a forest tile, you'll get a grass tile. Um, there's a whole bunch of mappings like that. We will go through them all. But that's kind of one of the ways you can convert other tiles into what you want. So if you are starting out as the deserts, um, these water tiles are the first like things you might want to look at because they're the easiest to harvest water from to convert to deserts. But maybe with a forest, you need to first harvest wood to get a grass tile, and then you harvest, I don't know, grass or whatever to get a dirt tile, and then from the dirt tile, we'll have to check out what makes sense. But that's kind of the like the idea is some tiles will be easier to convert and some tiles will be harder. So desert people and mermaids probably have like a more strategic, like immediately strategic enemy ship. If they're next to each other, they're probably going to be fighting more and more and like converting each other's tiles. Whereas maybe like elves, which are 3 or 4 steps away from becoming a desert, might be able to exist more peacefully, like in the area, without being immediately threatened all the time. But the two ways to interact with the world, one was harvesting resources from tiles, and you get those resources. The other one is using those resources on tiles. So the easy example here is if you've harvested water, um, maybe you're an elf and you're trying to convert a desert to a forest. You're probably going to want to harvest water in order to use that water on a desert to turn it into dirt. And then you'll have other stuff to go from dirt to grass to forest and so on. But the key thing is there, you harvest that water from one tile, which turns it into something else, and you use that resource on another tile. So there's a very complex web of state changes that we'll work with. And that's going to be fun to balance later. Mostly just thinking very general right now. I recognize like it's kind of a zero state game of, okay, well, I want to turn this into a desert or turn this into water. So I take this water and put it over here. But now you literally just have water and desert. You just flipped them and there's no like real state change in the at the world scale. Um, one, we will think about features to address that more, but one kind of really simple feature that I'm considering is the notion of activating tiles. So, for example, if you have uh, like farmlands and you were to use like, I don't know what items we'll have as resources, like harvestable resources, but if one of them were fertilizer, you could theoretically use that fertilizer on farmlands, and then for some amount of time it produces more of some resources, or like produces a different kind of resource. Um, so really all we have right now is this grid generation. We got a little camera controller that I put in for like middle mouse panning. It's got some edge panning that's real nice and slow. It's got zooming, but what we want to do. I think we'll work mostly on world generation today. The things that we want to do is we've got this generative aspect where we can regenerate it each time, except why we'll figure out why the camera is it's changing on the z-axis. So something's pushing it around. We will figure out why the camera is traveling through space. Oh, I bet I'm panning on the z-axis, and that's why it's also so slow. But yeah, we aren't too concerned about that right now. I'll double check the camera panning in a second, but basically what we want to do is we want to make sure this generation works. We want to build up like a world score for each of our races. So in this world, like maybe we'll start with a few races instead of all of them, but if we have water tiles, we track how many points the mermaids have. We track how many points the dwarves have with the mountains and so on. And then I think what we'll do is we'll add a canvas that takes the 3 least populous tiles. So they're all pretty even here, but maybe this tile up here, I'm not sure exactly what it was, like a marshland or something. If that has the fewest, and if desert had the second fewest, and if mountains had the third fewest, the races that correspond with those 3 least populous tiles are the 3 options that you would have. So you'd be able to start as one of those 3 races, and you'd probably compete against the other 2 races. I don't yet know if we want to start with like if you were to start as mermaids here, whether you want all of these as your initial like 3, 6, 9 bases, or if you want to like pick one and that's where you start and you can like travel to one and conquer it or something. Um, that might be, maybe we start with all of the bases and then when we want to like stretch out the early game, we can give the player an option to start with one and then go out and conquer the others before somebody else like takes them over or something. So I do see what's happening with the camera here. If you look, when we pan up and down, it's panning on Z instead of Y. So we'll go fix that real fast. First thing, if you notice up at the top, I just almost pointed at my screen. And then we will go ahead and build that initial canvas. So let's go check out this camera manager and figure out where we're panning on Z, obviously. Just a silly little mistake from a silly little guy. We will be panning on Y. I think we actually want to split out edge pan speed and middle mouse pan speed because it's pretty slow on the edge pans. I will go ahead and do that real fast. And it's set to like 3, so let's default that to 10, and we'll rename this to mouse pan speed. But we'll use edge pan speed for each of these edge pan. And here's our middle mouse pan, which is mouse pan. We got the ability to focus on something, but I'm not going to use that yet. We'll do that when we like click on a tile, we'll focus on it, and we'll pop up a little menu saying like what it can transition to, what you can harvest from it, and so on. And I guess I'll also mention I'm going to test the painting now, but the way the player interacts with the world is when you come in and you have your, okay, that painting is much better. Might do the mouse panning a little lower. But for example, here we're mermaids. The actual interaction, like UI that we'll see, is you'll see little mermaids in the tiles that have your bases. And if you want to harvest, I don't know how you make more water actually. We'll figure that out. But it's a bad example. If we wanted to use water, if we had water, maybe these are producing more water and we want to use that water on other tiles. Maybe the grassland, if you use water on it, becomes a marshland. If you use more water on that, it becomes ocean. So we're producing water here. The way you would interact with these other tiles is you're going to click on this tile. It'll pop up a little box that shows like all the different stuff you can harvest from this, grass and probably some other stuff, but also the stuff that you can use on it to convert it to other tiles. So let me just bring up a little notepad window. So if you pretend this is the tooltip that shows up when you click on this grass tile, we'll have like harvestables, and these will be like buttons. So you could harvest grass or I don't know, flowers, or you can use like water, and it'll convert to a little picture of a marshland. Side note, my neighbor is mowing right outside, so I apologize if there's any background noise. I'm sure they'll be done in a minute. But this is kind of the format of a tooltip that we'll be building. If you wanted to say like use seeds as a button, maybe it turns into a forest. These are little icons for the tiles. So you'd click on this would pop up and you would click on a button. So the button will trigger a command that needs to be executed still. So if you trigger the use water to turn this into marshland, what you'll see is the code will find the nearest tile with your mermaids that has the water resource. And then you'll see somebody from your town, your kingdom, whatever, start walking from tile to tile. And then they'll use the water. It'll take a moment, it'll convert this tile into a more watery marshland tile, and then they'll walk back. So it's not necessarily like a real-time strategy of like you're constantly clicking on stuff, but it is like you can be doing other stuff while that happens. You can say, I want to use water on this tile, this tile, this tile, this tile. I want to go harvest wood from this. I want to go harvest wood from this. I want to plant seeds here. And so there's a lot of potential for like really high APM if you're really thinking things through. But you are limited in the like travel speed of your units, so it's a little more slow paced, at least in like easier levels. The curveball comes in when you also have, say, lizard people in this desert here, and you have chosen to use water on this tile. You're 2 tiles away. They're 1 tile away. If they were to trigger a command for like using fire on this tile and burn it up into dirt, they could get there and do that before you get there and do that. So there's a little more like almost like a board game, how many tiles away, um, but it's not turn based. So you'll be able to see like this person. There's a little person here that is walking over to this tile. You'll be able to see their destination and like their intent, their intention, what they're going to do at their destination. So if you were to send a person from here to use water, and he's just now leaving the tile and you see somebody from here going here, you might want to click on your little guy that you sent and have him go do something else, or like cancel that action or something so you don't waste the time walking there. And then you end up using water on a dirt tile instead. Um, and there might be some interesting strategy of like if you are the lizard people and you see somebody from like way up here is coming to, I don't know, use uh, rocks on this tile to make it more hilly or like mountainous. Um, there might be something you can do to convert that tile into another tile before they get there, where using rocks on that tile would be more beneficial to you. That's all TBD on the like web of actions that we can do and the harvestable resources and all that. Um, Still just thinking very general, like what's the vibe, what's the gameplay, and we can figure out the balance and mechanics, like implementation a little bit later. But that's the core way to manipulate tiles in this world. You basically either extract resources or use resources on them to convert them into other tiles. There's a state machine of how each tile can turn into each other tile, and whoever can convert the most amount of tiles to their race's preferred tiles. So mermaids have the most water. They're beating out dwarves who have only 4 mountains. Like there's that inherent win condition there, not only for like ending the game, but if you take over more tiles, you're gonna have easier access to getting to important tiles sooner. So if you wanted to use water on this tile, for example, but you hadn't taken over this tile, if this were a grassland or something, and you wanted this tile specifically, it'd be very, I don't know, dangerous for you to send somebody from here all the way over, when somebody on this tile or this tile could get over there and effectively block whatever action you're trying to do. So you get a lot more immediate vicinity actions. Like if you start with this world as mermaids, you're probably going to be focusing a lot on these immediate neighboring squares, converting those into water. And then from those, you convert the next one over into water, and the next one over, and the next one over. Because then it's a lot more of just you playing effectively like by yourself. You're playing through this puzzler of how do I get a dirt tile into a water tile? Oh, I need to use this item and then this item, instead of playing that like multiplayer, more strategic experience of how do I get a rocky hills tile into a water tile while also avoiding the dwarves and the elves that are nearby from blocking my moves. Um, so I think that'll form a really good learning curve because you kind of inherently have a defender's advantage and you can focus really well on just what's immediately nearby. And I might also reinforce that by adding some like maybe fog of war, maybe optional fog of war if you just like that would be a really good way to convince new players to only focus on what's nearby instead of um, taking more dangerous treks out into further locations. We'll see what we need to do for the onboarding, but that's kind of the gist for the game, what we're going for. I know I talked for like 20 minutes. Do you guys want to get into some code? I love code. All right, so we fixed the edge panning. Let's go ahead and let's build up our initial race selection canvas. I see on the stream one of my notepad windows is on the stream. Which window is this? I think it is one that I was taking some notes earlier on like how I wanted to do something, but I do not know where that window is. There we go. Gotcha. I'm going to take that off the stream because we will see that code in a second. Just building out some like interfaces and planning stuff out. Here we go. Remove notepad. Cool. So what we want to do is in our game manager, I believe. So we're starting up a world. We want to generate the world. It's here that we will say like find the 3 lowest populous races and present them as player race choice, and then we'll start the game. So we will do this in the world manager where we're building this, and that works right now by just saying clear out the existing world. You can't use destroy in the editor, so that's why this code looks so funky. We're using destroy immediate on a delay call, and that's just so I can regenerate world in the editor for testing. But we generate this world by generating the world data, which basically looks at how many tiles we'll end up needing and just gets a random tile from the list of valid starting world tiles. So all these. If we wanted to make the world more, what's the opposite of diverse? Mono something. If we wanted the world more simple, we could just make it like desert, forest, and plains, and like mountains or something. And then maybe that's a good idea. Let me see what that looks like. But if we were to just do these 3, we get a very simple world. So at this point, we could like swap tiles out for specific ones. For example, if the player wanted to play as dwarves against elves and mermaids, we could take out those 3 races tiles from the tile library, build the world, and then only add 1 of that tile. So that might actually be more of what we want. I don't know if that's more fun than getting the world and then deciding what race. Because Because if we have this, I do kind of like the idea of the like Settlers of Catan vibe of having a minute, looking at the world and saying, what kind of strategy do I want based on this world? It's kind of the opposite vibe as um, just queuing in and getting a random world and adapting your playstyle to it versus looking at the world and coming up with a playstyle to use. Um, Let me see if Andrew has any ideas on this. What I was trying to figure out is whether it would be more fun to load into a new game. You've never played the game before. There are pros and cons to when you choose your race. Um, Option one is you're choosing, I want to play as giants. I want to play as mermaids. We will take out the tiles for that race and the races you're playing against. We'll build the world, and then we'll give you one of those tiles. In that strategy, you don't know what world you're going into. Like, you don't know the strategic uh, components of it, but you're more going in blind. It's the more traditional like RTS strategy. For example, here maybe shrubland is fairies, water is mermaids, woods are elves. We'd want to build the world minus those three. So we get something like this, and then we'll add one tile for each of those randomly, and then you start playing. The alternative is if we were to build a world just completely randomly, and then give you the option of what race do you want. So you look at this and you're like, oh man, there's tons of like plains and tiles that really easily convert to plains. I'm going to play a race that really relies on plains. I definitely don't want to be a mermaid, and I don't want to be um, something less populous like that. Obviously, there's a lot more balance issues there. The strategy we would probably go with is tallying up the three least populous tile types. So in that case, it would be mermaids, this like shrublands, which has three, and probably these like rocky hills, which have, well, there's a few of them. These stony, um, whatever we want to call this. There's four of those. So your choices are like a really hard mermaid, a medium shrublands, or like an easy rocky fields. So you kind of have some choice on like difficulty there, but it couples that difficulty really closely to the like fantasy of playing as a certain species. So maybe it is a good idea to decouple that, build the world, and then you can fully like role play as this race. I think that's what we'll do. I think we'll let the player choose what race they want to be. We will create some races that they want to play against, and then we will build the world minus those tiles, swap in one tile for each race. So we can go ahead and do that. I think what we should probably do is let's make another scene real fast. Um, Game setup. And we'll make a very, very simple canvas because I do not want to spend a lot of time theming this if we don't know we want to keep it. So we'll have a panel, UI panel, race, grid. We'll create like a prefab for each race that we want to make valid. Let's say race selection card. Make this a lot bigger, and then give it a TextMesh Pro. I think I'll mock all this up real fast, but it's probably nicer to just hard code it in the actual game for now, so we can focus more on the fun stuff instead of passing data between scenes. And I know last week Jason's story had really good advice on how to load in the game manager on each scene instead of having to work with the like janky preloading stuff that I did in the last demo. So we'll just say race name. We'll come back and get everything all sorted out in terms of passing data around scenes. But for now, we just stick that in there. We give this a horizontal layout group for now. Let's give it smaller on the screen. We drop a couple of those in. We want it centered, and do we want to expand the heights and the widths? Maybe with some padding. Or spacing, I guess. Let's do like big spaces and also big padding on left and right. Something like that. And then we'll add more races, obviously. We'll probably do like a grid so you can choose something else. We'll add the details, a picture, and so on. But you'll click on one of those, it'll pass that data along to the game view. Let's say game. And then we will build the world based on that. So let's add that logic in. So what we want to do is say the game manager is, we want to store the player race, which we will hard code for now, just in the editor, and then we'll say public list of race enemy races, which will also hard code for now. Let's do that real fast. So this is basically mocking out from the previous scene. You can pretend that we chose that we want to play as dwarves. And we want to play against mermaids and lizard folk. This is also how we'll say, like, we'll probably have some setting in the game set up for like how many players. So if you wanted a bigger game, you can add in goblins and giants, but this game manager will be passed along from scene to scene. We'll set it in the previous scene, pass it over to here, and this will be set when we are ready to do our world generation. So what we will do is remove playable race tiles from beginning library. This is in the world manager, which is reinstantiated every time we load this scene. So I think we can modify this willy-nilly without having to copy the original over somewhere. So what we will do is we'll create that and say for each race playable race in game manager.instance. Oh, we don't have our singleton library. Let me grab that real fast. Just from my previous project. I don't remember offhand just how to write the 50 lines offhand. I know I'll forget something. Guess I can. We will grab that real fast. Singleton. Paste that in. Thanks Chase again for this great script that I found like years ago and have used, or Luke, not Chase, for used on like everything. So we now got our game manager singleton, which means we can grab this off of enemy races. And for each enemy race, we want to remove, what's our variable called? Valid world generation tiles dot remove, and then playable race dot, I don't know if we actually, okay, we do have home tile, dot home tile. So each of these races have a home tile set. So we'll double check that real fast. But dwarves are home in the mountains, elves in the forest, fairies in the shrubland, giants in the hills, goblins in the dirt, halflings in the plains, harpies get highlands, lizard folk in the desert, and mermaids in the water. So what we will see is we will remove those. We also want to remove our players' races tile as well. I'm gonna sneeze 1 sec. Maybe not. Okay, so this will basically leave our library, everything else will be valid, but we won't generate any tiles of the playable races. Let's double check that. So we shouldn't get any mountains ever, we shouldn't get any water, and we shouldn't get any desert. Let's just do a few generations. Looks good. And so we remove those from the pool, we generate the world. Here we want to now add one of each of those tiles to the world. So let's say add playable race tiles to world data. And the gotcha that we want to avoid here is when we are randomly swapping a tile out for each of these races, making this a desert, we want to avoid the chance of doing the same tile twice. So we will say list of an int, what do we call this? Already swapped tile IDs. And then we say we'll make a list of the player race and the enemy race just so we can do it all in one loop, just for cleanliness. I'll say list. Say game manager.instance.player race. And we add in game manager enemy races, playable race swap into add race. So now with this loop, we want to for each race. We want to pick a random tile that hasn't been picked, load data, the race's home tile. So the home tile will basically say for this tile, it will load in the data of a desert instead of what it currently has. Just overwrite it. So I bet ChatGPT can just do this for us. So we generate a random ID. If we've already done the ID, we will keep going. There's technically a edge condition here where if the number of races is larger than the whole map, this will loop forever. I don't think we need to worry about that. So now we have an ID for that race, and we just want to say active tiles, or whatever we called it, live tiles dot at random tile ID dot load. What is this? Live tiles is a list of tiles. It should have a load data function, I think. Oh, right. We actually want the game object stored, or the tile manager stored. Live tiles. So let me look at, what are we doing with this live tiles thing? So live tiles is the actual data of what the world looks like, which is completely separate from the game objects that it renders in. We could just build a parallel array that has the tile managers in the same parallel indices, which would allow us to get the manager for each tile in the world without having to query for it every time. Like right now, without that, what we would need to do is basically go get the nth child of the world map object and query the tile manager off of it. But I think what we want to do is just say private list tile manager, and we'll say live tile managers. This guy will rename to live tile data. And down here, we can just say tile manager, manager is the tile.get component, tile manager. Clean this up a little. And we say, what do we call this? Live tile managers.add manager. So now they're in the same order as the data as well. So the tile data at index 7, if we hit live tile managers at index 7, we know it's the manager for that 7th tile. Um, just a little nicer way to sync up the data and the rendering without having to query the rendering from the data every time. So live tile managers at random tile ID load data, and that is race.hometile. So now we should, if we were to generate the world, we should see one mountain, one desert, one ocean. We will give that a shot. We do. Interesting. This is actually destructive here. What happened is last time when we ran it, we removed those 3 from the valid world generation tiles, and they stayed after playtime, which we do not want. Let me add those back in. Got mountains, and we got water. Let me play it real quick and make sure that that actually happened. So we see them removed here. Right, I didn't initialize that list. But what else is broken? I guess I'll fix that real fast. This list here, live tile managers. But we exited out of game modes. That data should be back, hopefully. Game manager, map. It is back, so that is good. Let's try this again now that we have the list initialized. Might still error, because those errors looked unrelated. What do we got here? Live tile managers. Either this is not set or this is not set. All the races should have a home tile, so live tile managers should be set. Let's go ahead and say debug.log swapping tile in at ID random tile ID. And we'll also say race.hometile.tile name. So if this prints, we know this is set and this is the issue. This is the issue. If it doesn't print, then we're erroring here, and it's an issue on the race. Let's look at this other error real fast too. Game object has been destroyed. Oh, I think that's to do with, I think because we're delaying this, when we start the world, it's probably triggering this and then trying to destroy it. So maybe I'll come back to that. But I think for now, let's just stick to, wait, I don't need to be playing it anyway. I can do it in the editor. Oh, right, and that's why it deletes those, because we are in the editor. Okay, we can fix that. Let us add that back in. So we got desert, mountains, ocean. We probably do want to like duplicate it, I guess, if we ever want to be able to modify it in the editor. But it's not really a big deal. So we got ID of 29. That does not sound right. What's our height and width? 8 by 8. 8 times 8 is 64, right? So 29 should be fine, actually. So we should also print out how big our array is. Let's say debug. We have live tile managers count tile managers, because I think that's probably the issue. And playable races gets called here. We do our tile managers up in draw hex grid, which happens afterwards, right? Because yeah, we haven't actually loaded in that tile yet. So really what we can do is just set the tile data. We don't even need the managers yet, at least. We can just set the tile data directly, because we haven't even drawn the world yet. It doesn't even have a thing to load data in yet. So what we'll do is say live tile data is equal to what do you want? Live tile managers? Right. I think we'll want those managers later for updating stuff more like at playtime, but I think this is fine for now. I'm not gonna run this in the editor. I'll go ahead and play it. We should get 1 desert, 1 mountains, 1 water. I'm gonna disable that edge panning because it's kind of annoying in the editor. 1 water, 1 mountain, 1 desert. That works. And they technically can be like next to each other, but that's just the nature of random worlds, so I think that's fine. Actually, maybe we just play unfocused, and then we don't have to worry as much about the edge panning. Let's try this once more. I just want to see if that works. You know, we'll disable the edge panning. So public bool enable edge pan. I guess that's probably a feature we want in the settings anyway, because I know a lot of players don't really care for edge panning. Let's try this once more. Okay, so we've got our world, we got 1 mountain, 1 desert, 1 water. That works out well. And that's in the actual data, which gets properly drawn. So that works well. So there's a few things, a few bigger pieces we could work towards now. I do want to, for this, we want to figure out if that continues to be an issue when we hit play. We should double check that. But also in the remove playable races from playable race tiles from beginning library function, we only want to temporarily remove these if we're doing it in the editor. We don't actually want to permanently remove them. So maybe what we do is just, this is fine. Let's say public list tile, and we say valid tiles for this world. And we will use that everywhere, but we'll default it to whatever this value is. So found world generation tiles. We want to take these, want to remove those, and in start or somewhere we want to just copy that over, and surely that's a deep copy. And we will double check that. World map. These should, let me double check. Valid tiles for this world. Okay, so if we generate a world now, keeps all 11 elements, and we have one tile for desert, mountain, and water. Cool. Okay, so the big things that we're missing, obviously, are little people in our tiles that will just walk around randomly within that tile when they have nothing to do. Probably you have like either 1 to 3 of those little people per tile, because they're the ones that are going to walk out and do something. One is the simplest, obviously. If you queue up an action for this tile and this tile, you have one person that walks out, does this, comes back, walks over, does this. If you had 2, obviously they could go out in parallel. So I think we want to probably start with 1, but plan for potentially multiple. That seems like a good like race perk. Like if everyone normally has 1 or 2, maybe some race, goblins or something, has 3 per tile. We need code for pathfinding from tile to tile, which should be pretty easy, but I've never done hex grids before, so might throw a little curveball there, but I mean, you just have, is it 6 neighbors? 6 neighbors instead of 4. Surely it's same sort of like pathfinding where you just modify the neighbor code. We need the actual like command pattern system of actions waiting to be executed. So if you click on this forest tile, you get the tooltip and you say, I want to harvest wood from this tile. Harvest wood from this tile should be stored in a queue somewhere for your people to pull from and say, I'm executing this one now. On my way, executing, on my way back, clear from the pool. Obviously, there's a lot of UI that needs done. Probably listing all of your resources, which we will figure out what all they are. Each tile will have probably 2, maybe like 1 to 3, probably like 2 resources that can be harvested from it, and also probably about 2 ways that resources can be used on it to turn into other tiles. Each tile will also have a list of each resource that it can produce and also has like in stock ready to be harvested. So like wood remaining and something else remaining. If you were to harvest all the wood, that's when it translates into another tile. But until you've harvested all that wood, you can still be harvesting some wood that you can be using on other tiles without converting this one. So there's a little more like skill ceiling there. If you really wanted this forest to stay, but you wanted a lot of wood, you kind of need to manage the resource there, especially against maybe other races that don't want this to be forest. If you get it low on wood, they could come in and also harvest wood and convert it into something else. We also need to think a little bit about like the wind condition. Do you convert the whole board into mountains? Do you have some sort of like combat of do you kill everyone in order to win? Do you lose if somebody kills you somehow? Are these starting tiles maybe like capital tiles or something? Can they be captured? What happens if you either lose like all of the water tiles you've converted? Is that fine if you still have this one? Do you lose if you lose your original tile, so you're trying to play very defensively? I think a lot of that goes into kind of the game feel aspect. Um, Not necessarily like the low level systems we're building now. We probably want a few nice little helper functions on the camera, like you click on a tile, the camera pans over to put that tile in the center, does some visual effects. Maybe if you click on one of your people as they're going from tile to tile, the camera will focus on them and follow them. Um, yeah, I still think it's a little weird to have this sort of like real-time strategy, but also asynchronous. The specifically the interaction of if I issue a command to harvest rocks from this tile, there's some time until it's done, which is fine. But what happens if somebody over here goes and harvests all those rocks before I get there? What should the interaction be? Should I just show up and there's nothing to do, so I go home? Do I get any sort of alert when this guy sends his guy over? Should I know ahead of time, like, hey, this command isn't going to work? Like, let's go home early. Should I show up and wait for more rocks? Should I find the nearest tile and switch to getting rocks there? I would. I think the simplest thing and maybe the most logical thing too is just complete the path all the way there. If there's no rocks left to harvest, immediately head home and come back. And that makes things easy and simple to understand for like new players. But as players get quote unquote better at the game, they'll be able to see like, hey, this guy's path is listed as going to here and he'll be harvesting rocks. I see this guy also has a guy going over. You'll be able to see his path as well and he'll be harvesting rocks. So I can click on this, see how many rocks are there, and say like, oh, this isn't going to work. I can click on my guy and send him back early. Something like that. Um, yeah, there's a lot of little like UX systems, but maybe something small we can do before we wrap up this week's stream is just add how many workers are in each tile. Um, we don't need to move them from tile to tile yet, but in this example, we have 3 players. We have one here, and one here. Each of those should have some number of workers, and we can just make a little square or something to symbolize them, and they should just sit in the tile. And we'll build out like a player manager, an enemy manager, all that. That we'll be able to use those and send them out to destinations, but uh, let's just go ahead and build like the data of how we want to structure storing like the resources in a tile and the workers in a tile. So the things that we could do for that are we can store all that on the actual tile itself. So each tile has its own copy of anything on the tile. I think we want to do that for the resources specifically, but I think we don't want to do that for the workers. I think we want a, like a, let's say, players, uh, players container, and maybe even we'll handle the players separately because it's obviously user controlled. So maybe we call this enemies container, and then depending on the number of enemies we have, we can create like enemy manager objects within that, and each of those can have a tile that is their start tile. It'll also contain their workers on, or maybe just their workers and those workers' positions, which tile they're on, and also the list of commands that are waiting to be executed. So we're gonna block out a bunch of stuff, like mock it out, I guess. But let's start with an enemy manager, and we will have two of those in this hard-coded situation. We will go ahead and give them interesting names, which we will populate just from the race they're controlling. Enemy manager of mermaids and enemy manager of lizard folk. And these will be created on the game load with prefabs, just based on the enemy races selected on the previous scene. So let's give these guys their enemy manager script. Let's say they have a public tile, home tile. They have a public race. They probably have a list of workers, which is an object we don't have yet. A list of owned tiles is probably, well, see, I haven't thought yet if we want a notion of owned tiles or not. I don't think we do. I think we just want, I think each player should just have a list of workers. Maybe converting a tile to your home base tile gives you another worker. But for example, if you start out as mermaids here, you might start with one worker. If you convert this to water, you will then have two workers. If this converts back to grass, somebody else converts it to grass. Should you keep your two workers? Should you go back down to one worker? Should those two workers then live on this tile together because it's your only other tile? I think that makes sense. And that also prevents, like, it gives more comeback mechanics. It prevents people snowballing by just boxing you in, really, because you can attack on more fronts. It's more, uh, there's less of a distance between the number of workers you have versus the number of workers somebody else has. If they manage to take some of your tiles, you can still come back. It's just you have fewer, like, less area to work in. So yeah, I think that's what we want to do is you start out with one worker on your tile, and each time you convert a tile to your home tile type, you get another worker. You don't necessarily own that tile, but you do have a worker stationed there. And somebody else can send their worker and be harvesting stuff while you're there. Like, you don't own the land, so it's really up to you, like, what you're harvesting, what you're using it on. So we won't have owned tiles. We will, however, have a list of workers. And I think let's there's not really going to be a lot of like data stored on the worker, but I think there will be some helper functions that we'll write. So we'll go ahead and add a like poro worker. I don't really want to take the worker name because I feel like that's probably used like in the job system. It's probably fine. We'll call it worker. And here we'll have a public list of worker. And yeah, I guess we can store where that worker is on the actual worker model. If we only had one worker per tile, it's easy to say like list of tiles where the workers are at. But because we can double up workers on tiles, I think this might be the best way to store it, unless we want some sort of dictionary of like either a dictionary from a worker to a tile to make lookup faster, or we could even do a dictionary of a tile to a list of workers on it, which is even faster lookup for what we want, but it's a lot more like maintenance, especially as we are moving from tile to tile. I don't necessarily think that's what we want. So let's put all that on the worker for now. We can always pull it out. And let's say our worker has a sprite. And let's just stick strictly to data for now. Obviously, they'll all look different because of different races, but we have a public bool executing job, whether they're currently like doing something on their way out to somewhere, harvesting, using an item, coming back. We'll probably convert that into like more of a state machine later, but for now we can just get our idle workers by ones where executing job is false. We will probably put a current, we want that command pattern, so we will say a job, and we'll create a file for that. I think we should probably just do like a polymorphic thing of like harvest job and harvest job. I need a better name for like using an item on a tile, but we'll say modifier job. We're not going to be building anything, but we could, and that's kind of how maybe some races will have another variant of job where they can do other stuff to the tile, who knows. But the job, for now, we should have a public tile origin. Do we need to store where we came from? Probably so, because we want to send people back to that tile when it's done. So we'll say origin tile, public tile, destination tile. We also are going to want a resource model, and that'll be useful on the actual tiles, so we can specify what resources it will produce. And it'll be good in like the inventory-ish system where you know what resources you have and can spend on tiles. So I think the resource should probably be a scriptable object, because we want to make those ahead of time, and there are going to be different types. So we will say create asset menu, file name. What's the despotism? Which is a fun word that means basically eliminating everybody else by force. So we got our resource name. We'll want our resource icon. We can skip the visuals for now. That should be good enough for now. We can always add more later, but the job is to, so a harvest job will have a harvest resource. A modified job will have a use resource. So we'll say to do harvest. Okay. So do we need to store a reference back to the worker on the job? I don't think so because, well, yeah, we probably do because the POV we want is like a manager looks and finds jobs that are not currently being worked on, assigns them a worker, which is how we'll know whether it's being worked on or not, and then also tracks whether it's in progress or done. So we will say public worker, assigned worker, and public bool job in progress. Okay, so let's head on back. This worker doesn't necessarily need reference to the current job, but it will be nicer to have it so we can do like pathfinding. If there's any issues, we can re-pathfind to the job. It'll also let us see whether this worker is currently idle or not without having to query all the workers and check, or all the jobs and check if this worker is assigned to a job or not. So that'll be nice. So we are back to here. We can say public list job. We have a queued jobs array. Does our worker have the tile they're on? Public tile, current location. That's a little bit weird because we aren't going to move them like pieces on a board. It's not like they're going to move from this tile, like the center of this tile to the center of this tile. We're going to have them move from here and then slowly walk over, slowly walk up and over. So they'll have a position. So say current tile. They'll have a position, like an exact coordinate position, but we also want to know what tile they're on, just so we know whether they're on the right tile to do the job, I guess. And also, I think it'll be, what is going on? I think the pathfinding will be nicer if we pathfind from tile to tile instead of trying to figure out the exact path from just pixels. We'll just basically have nodes at the center of each tile. So can I do this? Current tile. Why do I put in two T's? Current tile. That's super weird. Okay, that's fine. So the enemy manager has a list of workers, list of queued jobs. We can say public worker next idle worker. We can do this as a little helper function. Come on, ChatGPT, I would love for you to write that and just give us a worker that can't do something, we probably want to first, I mean, the best solution here is to tailor the next idle worker for a specific job because we want to sort by distance to that job. So I guess we'll do that. And we will say to do sort workers distance to job tile. We'll obviously have some void update. We want to do enemy logic. Assign jobs. We probably want to like find nearest tile or find a tile within in distance that is in conversions away from our home tile or convert the nearest tile closer to home tile. So that's probably the easiest AI we can implement, is just have some sort of radius where if there's any tiles within that radius that is just like one conversion away from being mountain or desert or whatever, go queue up a job for that tile to do it. And if there's not, then pick a random tile near us and convert it one step closer. So it's fine. We will do different logics for different races, I think. But that's good enough for a player, or for a easy enemy, and theoretically our job system will just handle that. Send off workers, it'll get done, they'll come back, and we can just have logic here. What else do we need? We want a player manager, but I think we will hold off on that a little bit. I mean, I guess we can. Let's start mocking out what we need exactly. So the player manager, little player manager script, I guess, could be in like game manager or something, or better names, but it's fine. And really, this should probably also be a sibling to the enemy manager, because it's going to have a lot of the same data. It's just going to have a different update function and some other related stuff, because we'll be doing it automatically for the enemy, but the player, obviously, we want them clicking around and stuff. So I wonder if you can I mean, we can create a parent manager to both that has this data. What do you even call that, though? We've got an enemy manager, we got a player manager, a race manager or something, a civilization manager. Why not? Alright, so our civilization manager gets these. It's got none of this because we will do those in the actual managers. This gets a civilization manager inheritance, and this also gets it. Void update gets to do player input stuff. So that's how we'll create our jobs. Maybe we say public bool is dead. We say return workers dot count is equal to 0. And I guess if that is what we want to do, we need a way to kill workers effectively, because we talked about you convert this tile to water, you get a second worker, but if this tile goes back to grass, all your workers are here. Maybe the way to lose is you lose all of your home tiles. I think that's better. So we will say we want a world manager. Return game manager dot instance dot world manager dot tile count of home tile. So, oh, this is actually that function that was on the screen earlier, but we can just rewrite it. We say for each tile in needle in our live tile data. Yeah, live tile data. We say count is equal to 0. If tile is equal to needle, then count plus equals 1. Or right. And I think what we want to do is just, we'll do that. It might be a little less efficient to do string comparison, but I would rather a little bit less efficiency and not worry about whether equals is properly defined for scriptable objects. So yeah, we've got our tile count is equal to 0. Then this player, or this civilization, is dead. This is something that should be on the civilization manager because the player will also want to get their next idle worker for a particular job. I'm not sure the best way to have like an update function in this method and ensure that it always runs in the child classes that will also probably be defining their own update methods. So let's just say internal assign unassigned jobs to idle workers. And we can make sure that this gets called in here. Oh, is it not internal? Protected. Right. Probably was internal then. Okay, so we say public job next unassigned job And this is probably an easy write for AI. Perfect. If the job does not have an assigned worker. Right. It probably thinks that's a bool. Didn't we add in progress? That's fine. If job is not in progress, we say job unassigned jobs to next. If unassigned job is not equal to null, then we get a worker. If worker is not equal to null, then we probably want a method on our job to assign it to a worker, or a method on our worker to assign a job to it. I think on the job makes more sense. And there's no way to like kill a worker right now. Which would get the job out of sync. If the worker dies in progress, we don't want to lose that data. And there's no way to cancel a job. Well, there is a way to cancel a job, so we do want to store the data on the job, and then when the job gets canceled, we propagate that back to the worker. I did just realize that it's probably a nice little exploit, which we will address in balancing, but if you're getting a new worker every time you convert a tile back to your home tile, what you could do is, if it were easy to convert this to water, you could convert this to water, get another worker, and then you can convert it away from water. You have your two workers, you could convert it back to water again, and you could basically just get tons and tons of workers on your own. I don't know if that's a bad thing, because it's like everybody else is spreading out throughout the world. Maybe it's a strategy for getting more workers at the cost of less expansion. But I'll have to remember to test that out once we get into like balancing to see if that's an issue. Okay, so public void assigned worker, and we will say assigned worker is worker in progress is true, to do pathfinding to destination. And we want like tell worker to go to follow the path. We want to say origin tile is equal to worker.current tile. Our destination tile will already be set because that'll be set when we create the job. We might want like on arrive at destination on completed harvest on completed modify, and also on returned home. That might be something we want to do either for like the state machine for the pathfinding. Like we want to start out pathfinding to the destination. When we arrive there, we want to start harvesting for a while. When that harvesting is done, we want to pathfind home. So to do also tie pathfinding into this. So that'll set that. I think we also have a worker.current job. Yes. Cool. So that covers what was necessary for that. So now for both players and enemies, if we assign unassigned jobs to idle workers, we're just grabbing the next unassigned job, grabbing the next worker, and then we say unassigned job dot assigned to worker, and why do I even have an exclamation point there? Cool, so maybe we say assign next unassigned job since we're just doing one at a time and it's just going to be called once per frame anyway. Just a little nicer cleanup. So each player now has a method for getting their jobs, getting their idle workers. The job will queue up the state changes on the worker to pathfind to the tile and back. And we will handle the harvesting from the job based on whether it's a harvest job or a modified job. And that's also where we'll add the resource to the player. So I guess maybe we want to have a track what resources everyone has. Let's say a resource and a quantity. Resource inventory. Let's say resource stockpile. So if we are a player, we click on this forest tile, we click harvest wood. That will create the job. One of our idle workers will be assigned to it. They will pathfind out. They will harvest the wood. It'll add to the resource stockpile. The harvest will be complete and they will pathfind back. I guess we can split out these jobs now so we can kind of block out more of that resource acquisition stuff. So I know Unity has some like background job stuff. I don't think it's actually necessary for this. We're just using the same name. So we will say, let's see. We'll do a harvest job and a modify job. We can stick them in a jobs folder later. We'll call it harvest tile job. Cool, so those will both inherit from our job function and we can start splitting out that logic a little more. And I will probably block that out a little bit and then maybe stream for about 12 more minutes until 3 o'clock and then call it good for the week and be more heads down and get some more work done. So our harvest job inherits from maybe we call that a tile job, but for now it's just a job. We've also got a modified tile job. Which also inherits from the job. We got our job. So what in here should we pull out? Assign to worker. Pathfinding is the same in both. These guys will have, so we'll do a on completed modify maybe. I'll come back to that. Let's see, how do we want to store the state machine for the workers? I guess in the worker class. And maybe we just do something simple like enum of job states idle on route working returning. And we will say we don't need the executing job anymore because we can just set a job state defaulting to idle public enum. And I know we broke a few things because we rely on that bool in a couple places, but that's fine. We can say this worker is let's also say assigned here. The computer is exploding. You can do it. Nothing's running. Assigned, comma, yes. And then in some update function, we can check for workers that are assigned but not yet en route, and then we will compute the pathfinding and send them on their way. But that's a little nicer than once they've been assigned, just say they're en route and trying to figure out pathfinding in this job class when we don't have an access back to the actual game object that we want to animate walking over. So we will say worker dot job state is equal to assigned, which should be enough to trigger the pathfinding somewhere else. Let's I guess let's open up our task manager and see what the heck is killing everything. Visual Studio using 100% memory. Am I indexing the repo or something? Okay, it's fine. Let's load this back in. Let's fix the bugs we definitely created. This guy, executing job. We actually want job state is equal to idle. Okay. Thought there would be more bugs than that, but that's fine. In the civilization manager, we probably want another helper function for our updates that will say pathfind assigned workers to destination. So in here we will grab all our assigned workers. If it's assigned, we will do give fetch path to destination to do set destination on worker manager, which will live on the game object of that actual worker, so that will handle the animation from pixel to pixel walking over. And we will say worker.job state is on route. Cool. So let's go ahead and also just do a little helper wrapper function for a tick. So we want to say sign next, because we don't want to have to call all these in the player manager and enemy manager. We'll just have one nice function that wraps up everything that we want. So we'll say tick. Maybe we call it tick civilization. And we want the same in our enemy manager. So that'll handle doing all the jobs, and we also can put the logic next to it. Let's do the logic first. So if we sign a job, it immediately fires off. Cool. So one thing that we will need is a little worker prefab that we can instantiate on the tiles with a worker controller that will handle movement from tile to tile. Let's just use a little box for now. Let's do the triangle, that's fun. And let's put him always on top. Scale him down a little, like 2.5. That might be a little too small. That might be too big, but that's all right. We want to see him while testing. So we'll create a worker controller. And we will stick this guy as a prefab so we can instantiate it. So I guess actually we want on the tile object, tile, right. We want to define I guess not on the tile data, on the tile manager, I guess. We want a public void on tile transition effect that creates a worker for any race that has this new tile as its home tile. So if you create an ocean, any races, like a mermaid, will get a worker from that ocean. Is that weird if maybe I'm playing as elves and I need to get to a certain tile like forest, but one of those intermediary tiles that I go through is an ocean? Is it weird if I create one and another player gets a worker from it? Or should I restrict that to just if the player that did the transition, if that's their home tile, they get a worker? Probably that's the case. Like, good example is dwarves who want mountains and giants who want hills. So as you're adding stone to a tile, you'll go from like shrublands to this to mountains. So if this is hills, this is mountains. If I'm a dwarf and I raise this tile up into hills, should a giants player over here get a new worker from that hills tile? Probably not, I guess. Yeah, so we probably want to say player manager. We'll say civilization manager from or civilization that triggered transition. So we will say if the civilization.home tile is equal to our new tile, say tile data, which doesn't properly get set yet. So let's say tile data, tile data, new tile data, tile data. How many times can I say tile data? If that civilization's home tile is the new tile, then we add a new worker at that tile. So we say civilization.workers.add new worker. Do we have a nice little interface for this yet? We do not. So we'll create one. It'll default to a job state of idle, no current job, and we'll want to set the current title. New worker current tile is equal to, I guess it would be the tile manager and not the tile data, because no, it's probably, well, yeah, it's a good question, because what we want to use it for is the pathfinding, and the tile the tile data doesn't have any reference to where it exists in the world, because it's just the sprite and resources. It's just a reference to that tile data, obviously. The tile manager does, because the game object it's on has coordinates. So we'll do this for now. The worker current tile. I think we do want tile manager here. I think once we get into pathfinding, this will make a little more sense. But that should give us enough for now that we'll be able to access the coordinates. Assigned a worker. So when we assign a job to a worker, yeah, I guess we don't really, like, this was saying, hey, you came from a mountain, because this is just the tile data. It doesn't say which mountain. So it doesn't really make a lot of sense to be storing that data. We want the actual tile manager. Which I think maybe we come back to when we do that pathfinding, because we'll have a better sense of how we're storing the nodes and coordinates. Let's make sure we have no errors. Just want to wrap things up by walking through the logic. Just make sure I didn't miss anything. We will probably do pathfinding. I'll be gone next week, so I won't be streaming next week, but the week that I will resume is the week after. And if we're not back on You Are Not Alice, which is the game we've been working on for the past couple of weeks, then I'll probably work more on pathfinding and the actual interactions from the player, get this to a playable state. But let's just go through one final time the logic of the data structures and how this all passes data around in this world. So in this game, you have a random world of tiles. Your goal is to In this game, you have a random world of tiles. You play as a race that is trying to convert the world into your home tile. So mermaids want the whole world to be water, dwarves want the whole world to be mountains, lizard folk want the whole world to be desert, and so on. The world uses the races that everyone is playing as, strips out those home tiles, builds a world without them, and then adds in one tile to start in. So, for example, in this world, we're playing as dwarves, so there's only one mountain tile in the whole world, and we're against mermaids, so there's only one water tile, and we're against lizard folks, so there's only one desert. If we were to add in, say, elves and regenerate that world map, we would now only get one forest as well. So the more players that you have, the less varied the starting world is. And I think that's fine. You interact with the world by either harvesting resources from a tile, which if you harvest all of a resource, it can convert a tile into another tile type. For example, if you harvest all the wood from a forest, it'll turn into a grassy field. Or you can use those harvested resources on other tiles. So if you harvested all the seeds from a shrubland and used those seeds on a grassland, you can convert it into a forest tile. So that's the two ways to convert tiles. You either take resources away, convert that tile into another tile based on those resources being gone, or you add resources to a tile, which can also convert it to other tiles. And you're trying to convert tiles into your home tile so you can expand your kingdom, your civilization, whatever it is. Interface-wise, we'll have it to where you click on a tile, it'll show you if you harvest this resource, it will turn into this. If you harvest this resource, it'll turn into this. If you use this resource you have on it, it'll turn into this. If you use this resource you have on it, it'll turn into this. So you don't have to memorize the like complex web of states. You probably will as you get more and more into the game, but you can just click on a tile, see what all it can turn into. You click on this guy, you see, oh, I need seeds in order to turn it into a forest. Okay, I'm going to click around and see what other tiles I can harvest seeds from. And you click on this guy, you see, oh, I can harvest seeds from this. Oh, if I do, it'll turn into dirt. Okay, I don't really care too much about that, but there's this like really deep depth that you can probably get into of taking from one tile to give to another, the impacts you're having, because maybe you're up against whoever wants marshlands, and the easiest way to add marshlands is to add water to dirt or grassy fields or something. So you might not necessarily want to be creating dirt tiles everywhere because it's so easy for them to convert it into their own tile. Whereas if you're against, say, dwarves who want mountains, you really don't care about whether you're making dirt or whether you're making deserts, and so on. That's how you interact with the world. That's the goal. You're trying to convert the world to your tiles. You get a new worker for every tile that you convert to your home tile. So if you are mermaids, you start with one worker. You convert this into an ocean. Now you have two workers. Even if this gets inverted back, now your two workers go back to the one ocean you have. If you lose all of your home tiles, you lose. But you keep those workers even if you lose some tiles along the way. In terms of the action and pace of the game, what you'll be doing is you click on a tile, you see that menu that I mentioned of you can harvest these resources or use these resources on it. You will queue up actions to be done. So they don't happen instantly. If you are a mermaid and you want to go get seeds from over here, you'll click on this tile, you'll say harvest seeds. Your worker will then walk from tile to tile until it gets here, it'll harvest the seeds. If all the seeds are gone, this tile converts. If there's still seeds remaining, that's fine. You'll just fill up your seed inventory. You'll come on back. So you can have a bunch of actions queued up simultaneously. They'll just do one by one. You can also see, like, if you have an action being executed here, you'll see a little line of this worker is walking to here to get seeds. You'll also see that for every other player as well. So if somebody up here is coming here for seeds, you might be able to see, like, oh, he's 5 tiles away. I'm going to send a guy over there real fast, get those seeds first. And then his guy shows up, there's no more seeds left, his guy just goes home. So he wasted all that time. Yeah, I think that's the core of the game. It's still very early stages, obviously. I got this resource pack from a sale from Unity, which I can put in the video description, or you can come check us out on Discord, and I'll link it in there. And I really just wanted to do some sort of like small strategy game with these hex tiles. Never worked with a hex grid before. Looks really cool. I always love these sorts of games, like Heroes of New Earth. I probably put thousands of hours in as a kid. Some of the more like old strategy games, you know, they're always fun. I usually play the smaller ones, which is why I can't remember the names of them. They usually last a little while, and then people figure out how to game them too hard, and then you move on to the next game. But this is a nice little break, a little more strategy focused. The last couple weeks, we've been working on a game called You Are Not Alice, which is more of a social engineering sandbox for basically talking to a company's worth of chatbots where you are pretending to be employees of that company and convincing them to run some virus so that you can then access their computer and talk to their coworkers and repeat the process. So that was very conversational based. You can obviously see how like AI fits into that, both for conversations, generating like we generate all the file systems, all the files on their computers, all the relationships between people. Very AI heavy. With this game, I want to focus a little more on the AI logic, uh, which, like the strategic aspect of it, which we haven't really hit in our previous demos. So it should be a nice little game, little quick game to play by yourself, or I mean, multiplayer would be fun. We'll see if we add it. If it looks fun, let me know on Discord, and maybe we will. And yeah, I work for Chroma Golem. It's a game studio that I started with my friend Andrew. We build these little prototype demos that explore different ways to use AI in games. And eventually we want to do a more complicated RTS or strategy game or something like that. Probably with a lot more focus on like emergent mechanics and having these different AI enemies effectively playing their own game and making their own decisions based on the world, and you're just another player in that world trying to understand what it is they even want. So this is a very simplified base to something like that, where it's a more traditional AI approach of them making decisions on how to um, expand throughout the world, exterminate everyone. But in that sort of game that we eventually want to make, maybe they have different goals. Like elves really want to establish peace between giants and goblins or something. So their win condition is not clear. They want there to be peace in the realm, and that's what they're fighting for. And you don't necessarily know that, but maybe goblins just want like a specific race to lose. And so there's a lot to play with. There's a lot of cool AI stuff that we're building and trying to build out little libraries on the back end to make these smaller games go a little faster so we can get some prototypes out and get some feedback on some of the more like core AI aspects. We'd love for you to join us on Discord. We've got the Discord link in the description. I stream every Tuesday. Just few hours of game dev in Unity. I usually try and do something new each week, so it's always fun. But sometimes people really like the games, so I keep working on it for a couple weeks. Um, and I won't be streaming next week, the first week in November, but I will be back after that. So if you don't want to miss the stream, you can follow me here on Discord, or you can follow me here on Twitch, sorry, or you can join our Discord. Yeah, that's all. I will see you guys in a couple weeks. Thanks for joining me. Um, Thanks for coming along.